Come with me as I go see a new pelvic floor physical therapist at Pelvic Health Physical Therapy in Madison, New Jersey. Today I'm going to be meeting with Zarina, one of the pelvic PTs.
Let's do it, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you just gonna post it?
I don't know.
So if you have any pelvic floor dysfunction, right? Any, make sure you always work the abs because they're sitting on your pelvic floor. And second of all, make sure your hands are really, really cold. So diaphragm, pelvic floor, everything in between has no choice but to go down, right? So if the diaphragm is tight, you live this kind of world. It's constantly down.
I feel like mine's probably tight.
Yeah, for everyone. And if something is pressing down, what is the pelvic floor going to do in the return? It's constantly going to try to press it up and it's be tight. So I always start with the big sister, the diaphragm. And I tested, the shallow part is the front and you could feel this part. So feel this versus that. That soft, it has a bounce. That soft has a bounce. And this one, you see how it's lacking that bounce? Xiphoid process is always tight. And then you go, and I always compare to the opposite side. So in reality, so your only pull is right here. You could feel that, right? So the question is, why would you have a pull here? I take my hand because diaphragm inserts into L1, L2, and I go underneath on that side. You feel me? So I'm gonna block you on that side. You're gonna relax. Drop it back into my hand. Drop it, drop it.
Okay.
And now I'm gonna see, is it your lumbar that drives your diaphragm or diaphragm drives your lumbar? So I blocked the lumbar and it got soft, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's coming from your L1, not your diaphragm.
I'm not surprised by that.
So I usually block it and then I rock it. There you go.
Yeah, that feels so tight.
And you just do your breathing so the brain doesn't realize this is trauma. Now I'm in business.
I know I told you a long time ago, but do you remember when I mentioned that my legs get numb when I sit and when I lay and then my heels burn? Wanted to remind you.
Yeah, that's your lumbar.
I've had low back problems since I was in middle school. It's been a long time. I mean, when I stand up, my butt kind of sticks out, so I just assumed my pelvis was tilted, and it always feels like my low back is like crunching together. So I did.
Spinous processes come together because you probably arched too much.
Yes, and I went to back PT, and like they couldn't help me. So I was just like, okay, cool. Glad I did that.
But sometimes you have to think this question: if my back is arching in my lumbar spine, which means my thoracic is curving in a kyphosis, which now tells me my cervical is forward. So it could not be specifically your lumbar that is doing it. It could literally be coming from your cervical spine because it's a little too forward, right?
Okay.
Which tells you diaphragm is pulling you down and it pops your chin forward, right? Or if that's not the case, the question would be, is it coming from your feet?
Okay.
Right. Somebody who stands in this lumbar lordosis doesn't know how to put their weight through the posterior chain, so which means weak hamstrings, really poor motor control of the calves, and you don't know how to put weight through the heels. You're like a toe walker. That's an anxious walk. So kids will put a lot of pressure on their toes to get off those calves because they try to activate that fascia because the body is very nervous. So we don't know which one. Obviously, I'm not diagnosing it in one session, right? That's session number 2. Yeah. But at least if somebody had a conversation with you saying, is it coming from the curvatures of your spine? Or is it coming from your feet, right? Instead of just pounding that back and make exercises, and you're like, don't strengthen me, figure out why I have that curve, right?
Okay.
And watch, if I put my hand on your lumbar spine, and I find your mesentery root, right there. Watch the mesentery root. You don't need to see her face. Mesentery root, it's all kosher. You see, like here. So ASIS, belly button halfway is mesentery root. And that's what holds your intestines, right? See how I just blocked your SI joint, right? And then I press and you're like, oh, she's mobilizing my back. I'm like, no, that's the fascia of the intestines that inserts into your low back. And people are like, it's funny, after I have a meal or I have a bowel movement, sometimes my back hurts. I'm like, well, that's just fascia pulling on the lumbar spine. So I blocked it. Now I want to see if it's moving. Look at all of this mast cell activation.
I know.
Red.
Do people not get red?
No.
Interesting.
They do get red. You're just a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So which kind of tells me your collagen is a little weak. So maybe a little connective tissue disorder of some sort. So you should not be a stretching kind of person. You should be a strengthening kind of person.
Okay.
Every time we stretch, your collagen goes,
Yeah.
and it contracts on you. And people are like, after I stretch, I kind of don't even feel that good.
Oh,
But if you strengthen and you come out of the gym, you're like, yeah, I feel like a rock star. I'm like, bingo. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've always felt like my muscles everywhere are just tight.
If they're constantly tight, obviously it's a reflex. The brain is doing it. Yeah. I have some people who come in and they're like, I stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch. And they're like, I always feel tight. I'm like,
Yes.
You need to
Always
look at
tight.
They probably have some sort of a little collagen disorder. Yeah. Not like an EDS where I'm diagnosing
I
you.
know, I've always wondered if that
You
could
don't
be a
present like
thing.
an EDS.
Okay, cool.
No. You would be a disaster. Yes. You would have all this pain and you would come in and you're like, everything is just burning, everything is just achy. I have horrible fatigue. I wake up in the morning and I just can't get out of bed. It's a lot.
Okay. That feels
So the hip is attached to your pelvic floor, and the hip has two weird heads, right? And they tend to do this. So the minute they pop forward, because our feet are externally rotated, and I do this, and you watch the patient's face. Watch the face. Watch the face. Watch the face, right? And you're like, ew, stop doing that.
Yeah, that is not comfy.
No. Versus this side, you're like, oh.
Are you doing the same thing?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep. This side,
Nothing.
and then this side, you're like, ew. I told you. Come back. I am more interesting. So here's a bounce, and then here's a bounce. You see how the whole body just does it like a wave? That's a wave. And then you do this, and then it's like a brick wall. Yeah. So that tells us that one leg is a stabilizer and one leg is a mover. So, but that's not normal, because if you're stabilizing, right, that's the one you're loading most, because you're rotating on the opposite leg, on this leg, on your right side, and you're just grinding your left one because you're stabilizing. So, which tells me already, pelvic floor wise, if I go on your left side up front, you're gonna make a face, but your counter sits on the right side in the back, you're gonna make a face.
Okay.
Because pelvic floor, that's pelvic floor, right? So if this hip is tight, this pelvic floor is going to be tight on this side, but the body's going to try to stabilize it with the opposite side, always oblique. Because people think you're like front and the back. I'm like, we're not that easy. It's always opposite. So you move your right side, stabilize with your left, anterior front tightness, posterior right tightness. I always check the abdomen because rectus abdominis this muscle tends to throw trigger points, and when we do this, we go, oh, that's a lot on my bladder. I'm like, not bladder, because bladder is a little bit deeper. It's in here. That's bladder. That's rectus. This is the median ligament to your bladder, and you feel this cord, right? Not normal, that it's tight. So I take here, and I take here, and I approximate it and let it relax. And then this ligament extends. So this is your urachus, and it becomes a round ligament and inserts up here. I do a lot of external work because 50% of the dysfunction sits outside.
I love that. I'm used to just internal. I do that with my wand.
Yeah. You could do it on your own. This stuff you cannot do it on your own. No.
No one has ever touched me like this, that's for sure.
That's for the records. Nobody touched her like that.
Oh yeah, that feels so tight.
Isn't
Oh, yes.
And sometimes people will come in with like urgency and frequency. And I was like, you probably have trigger points sitting down here, and your urachus, which is a median ligament, is probably just tight. Release it.
Yeah.
And the bladder gets pulled up. You're like, stop pulling it up. This is her pubic bone, right? The rest you can't see. That's not for your eyes. But right here we have inguinal canal, and on the bottom we have obturator canal. We have nerves coming out of it, femoral nerve and obturator nerve. So you have to see her face.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
No. So we already said her left side is tight. So here's her right side. And you're like, okay, that's just a little orthopedically tight, right? And then here's her left side. You're like, oh, what is that?
That's
right?
so weird.
Yep. And this is fascia, because it's a hole. And that hole has, make a hole with your hand. Like a hole. It has a femoral artery, nerve, vein, empty space, lymph coming through. And now connective tissue is all around here, right? So here's all my junk. And now connective tissue is going to get tight. Make me tight. Did you just pinch me? Yes. So this is why I'm moving it now. And people go, oh, that feels weird.
It does feel weird.
Yep. I'm like, that's a stretch. But also, we're decompressing the structures, right?
Yeah.
I always look for the bounce. Oh, if you're doubting which part of the body is restricted, always look for the bounce. Bounce the body, doesn't matter, shoulder, rib cage, and if it doesn't bounce, it's restricted. That's it. You don't even have to go to grad school for that. Just bounce it. Right. See, I always bounce, and I'm like, does it bounce compared to this side? Because sometimes patients come in, come back now, look at my face. Patients come in and they say to me, I'm stiff everywhere. And I'm like, are you? But we're not symmetrical. Because you load one leg, you move the other leg, you have all these rotations. And they're like, I'm stiff everywhere. And I look at the bounce, right? Which now gonna tell me where's the dysfunction sitting. That's it. And I travel down the leg, and she's great. These are her adductors. Did you see that reaction? Her hand went like this. Ninja, like, don't touch me. Let's see if she's gonna do the same thing on this side.
It's like almost ticklish.
Yes. It's like almost ticklish, and you just want to grab my hand and like punch me in my face. Yes. Sometimes I will even go down to the feet and watch her body. You don't need to see our faces, right? Watch the body. This is her right side bounce, right? It goes all the way like a wave, right? And this is her left side bounce. Do you feel like this is like a peg leg?
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
So, but you are neutral. Check out them toesies. Watch this. You see, if you look at the toes and she's fully relaxed. Relaxed like you're going to sleep.
Okay.
Right? See, we're looking at the toes. She's not externally rotated. She's not internally rotated. Her ankles are internally rotated. So if you are pigeon-toed, then it looks like if you're pigeon-toed. So I already know that her femurs are internally rotated just based on her feet. So her exercises would be external rotation of the femur. No big deal. So look at the patients. You don't need to see this one. I'm just externally rotating her hip.
Look at the face.
Always remember, the hips are attached to the pelvic floor. If you have tight hips, 100%, my whole bank account is bet that you have pelvic floor dysfunction. 100%. Because how could you separate pelvic floor from the hip? You can't. Your hip is attached to a muscle called obturator internus. That's the side walls of your pelvic floor. So unless you cut that out, then you can't rotate your hips externally. But hips and pelvic floor, hand in hand. Abdomen and pelvic floor, hand in hand. Glutes and diaphragm and pelvic floor, all sisters. Right? The patient is gonna flip.
Okay.
I got your sheet. Believe it or not, pelvic floor is attached all the way to T9. And you're like, that's crazy, all the way downtown. Yes. So T9 and T10 has a neurological bundle that is responsible for the sensation of the bladder. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I have urgency frequency and I wake up at night and I gotta pee, and when I get nervous I gotta pee, and I'm in the car and I have to pee and I put the key in the hole and I gotta pee, I'm like, you need to release your thoracic spine. And they go, wrong side of the body. And I'm like, well, you have to figure out where do the nerves to my bladder come from, and that is T-spine. And who tells me that they have perfect T-spine? Nope. If you're a woman and you have a chest, you probably have a terrible T-spine, because these things in front of you, your boobies, they pull you forward and you curl your shoulders, probably since you were teenagers and you were developing your little buds and you didn't want anyone to see it. So we have terrible posture. And then plus now we always sit in front of the computer and the phone and we curl the thoracic spine even further into kyphosis. Definition of kyphosis is around the back. So if my back is round, right, and now I know that she's trying to also go into lumbar lordosis, that tells me her sacrum is probably dead. It gave up on her. So here's her lumbar spine. And again, I'm not popping her. I'm just making sure that it has mobility. Does it spring? If it's spring, it's alive. It does its job. So that was her lumbar. Watch her thoracic. She doesn't spring. It's like doing CPR on on styrofoam. No way. So if your thoracic is not moving, which now tells me your rib cage is not doing its job. And if your rib cage is not doing its job, you're not breathing. So you probably died. Yes.
Lots of shallow breath.
Oh yeah, if you have shallow breath, guess what happens? You just went into anxiety because you're hyperventilating. Your body doesn't know you have stuck rib cage. It's not that smart. It just measures how fast are you breathing, and guess what? Your rate is high, and then you go to cardiopulmonary specialist and they go, honey, you got issues with your heart and your lungs. We're like, nope, it's your rib cage because your thoracic spine is too stiff. And the rib cage is like a barrel, right? It should move, nothing is moving. It should move, ditto, right? So I'm gonna say, breathe into your posterior rib cage.
Okay.
She's supposed to lift up my hands and back. And I'm gonna block her to give her a little resistance and go. Spread it. You see the spread of my fingers? She's doing it. And down. Doesn't that feel weird?
Yeah.
Nobody breathing in the back. And you would be a perfect human being. It's a lot. It feels like an exercise.
It does.
Mm-hmm. So here's her sacrum, right? These two bumps. I know because this is her iliac crest, that's her L4. So I know the next one is L5. I can do the math up to 5. Yes. So here's her L5. And I'm trying to push that sacrum into flexion. Sacrum into flexion. You feel how there's no bounce? So we already determined no bounce in thoracic, no bounce in sacrum. So they're playing against each other, and the lumbar got stuck in between. So in reality, I don't think she has a lumbar issue. I think she's a thoracic patient. Yep.
Interesting.
And this is how we're gonna figure it out. So what are we doing? My question would be, let's say I never touched her, so I don't see any of this redness, right? Where's the dysfunction sitting? Let's say I didn't have a chance to touch her. So I'm gonna show you. Here's a cup. Here's a cup. It's really basic because wherever she gets really dark, this is where the dysfunction is sitting because she's missing blood supply to that fascia. So we leave it, 5 minutes. It's that complex, yes.
Okay.
Also, because she probably has a little histamine issue, it's gonna get really red around these cups. So it's also gonna tell us where the dysfunction is sitting. You should be on quercetin all year long.
Yeah. Oh, right where you're at is so tender. Oh. And I don't think a lot of people know about the connection between the jaw.
TMJ and pelvic floor? 100%. Because embryologically it's the same tissue, right?
Well, can you do a little riff on that?
What?
For the camera?
Now?
Yeah.
TMJ? No problem. Okay, I'm gonna sit while I'm rocking her booty. She gets 2 for 1.
Twofer.
Right. Anyway, so TMJ. Why would you get a TMJ? You will lock your jaw because you have tightness somewhere in the body, and you know everybody's different. So my anxiety could give me neck pain. My anxiety could give me some weird chest pain. But when we're a little upregulated in the sympathetic response, we forget that the dura mater, the palate, the vocal cords, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and the plantar fascia at the bottom of your feet, embryologically it's the same tissue. Right? It was developed like one giant sheet, and when you started to develop into a human, it kind of became different continents, but they vibrate at the same frequency. So if any of these sisters get upregulated, let's say you have a little headache, everybody else is going to get tight because they all follow the same message. If you went for a run and your plantar fascia is tight, now all of a sudden you're going to get a headache, and you're like, how did I get a headache? I went for a run. And I'm like, well, plantar fascia got tight, and it told the older sister dura up there, go tight. So, also in our sleep, when we get into REM sleep, we get into this left and right eye rolling in your REM sleep because the brain is interesting. It remembers all of the events of the day, and then it says in your deep sleep, hey, I got a picture of you eating a donut. Keep it or dump it. I'm like, dump it, because I'm asleep. Because your brain knows your conscious is really sensitive, but your subconscious is not. So when you're sleeping, the brain knows it could process a lot of traumatic things, and you will be okay because your conscious is asleep, right? So it goes, your limbic system, the little amygdala is processing in your REM sleep as you're moving the eyes, and goes almost like flipping slides. Here's a donut, dump it. Red light and you're standing in the car, dump it, because there's no emotion attached to it. But if you had, let's say, a fight with your mom, the brain's like, you want to keep that image? I'm like, yeah, it has an emotion attached to it. So now it's going to go back in the brain and file it. So when we sleep, we process a lot of emotions. So when I do, I'm probably going to clench. and go a little tight. So sometimes patients wake up and they're really tight in the morning, and I go, what did you process last night?
That was me.
Yeah. So, but then we develop this mechanism, right, where the body is like clench just because you're stressed. And we don't even know we're clenching. So people say to me, I don't clench during the day. I never clench on the toilet. I'm like, you probably do, but for you, that's the norm. You don't know the difference, right? And then I stick my finger on the outside and I massage the zygomaticus and zygomatic process and pterygoids and masseters, and I go into sternocleidomastoid and I just release the platysma, and they hate me. They hate me so bad because it's so painful. But what we don't understand, the vagus comes through the foramen magnum, the big hole in your skull, out of the brain stem, travels behind the ear, goes down the sternocleidomastoid muscle, right? And if it's tight, vagus go, see you later, not working. Or if you don't have vagus activation, then guess what? You're in constant fight or flight response because vagus is rest and digest. So you're not digesting, you're not breathing because vagus penetrates your diaphragm. All the organs are slow because they're like, well, we don't have to work because obviously we're being chased by a pack of wolves. And we have shallow breath and dilated eyes, and we're just out of our minds, but we don't know that the vagus is not kicking in. All you have to really do is just massage your neck and all of your jaw and your temporal bone, and then people go, that's so good, I got so sleepy, I feel so good, and my belly's gurgling. I'm like, that's vagus, you woke it up, so you should be probably doing it every single day.
A lot of my clients have TMJ issues.
Yeah. But so TMJ can be not a TMJ, so injecting it might be so useless.
Right. What spots are you on right now? What is
Urogenital triangle.
Oh.
I am externally. I am right here. Urogenital triangle. I'm all in this business.
Super sensitive.
Because if you have an issue here, nobody worked on this. That's weird. This is the same zip code.
Yeah,
You have vagina issues. Somebody has to work on superficial deep transverse perineal, ischia cavernosus, perineal membrane, bulbous spongiosum, because it's the same zip code. And your legs are closed, so everything is relaxed. So imagine during intimacy, you open your legs and now all of these muscles are stretched and they're tight to begin with. And people say to me, I have pain with initiation of the intercourse. I go, you don't have a vagina issue. You have the first layer, urogenital triangle issue.
How do you fix that?
Right there, I'm just doing it now.
Just like massage?
Yes.
Oh.
You stretch it.
Can you do that yourself?
Yes.
Oh.
Right. Your hands could reach down here.
Yeah.
People don't understand how durable female pelvic floor is, right? We could do gymnastic splits on it. We could deliver humans out of it, right? We would allow a 200-pound man do gymnastics on top of that for like, well, 3 minutes. But that's it. Like we take so much, and then when we go in and we do our own massage, we're like with one finger, like gentle. I'm like, what are you doing?
Does that side feel different?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because that was
Is this your left side?
Yeah, way more painful.
La la la! We call it consistency.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh.
Left is left.
We need a camera on my face.
Right here? No, there's nothing to see.
Just the faces I'm making. I mean, that spot too. Oh. But it's not painful, it just feels tight.
You have to see your pepperonis now.
My pepperonis!
That's her thoracic pepperonis. Check out her lumbar. Which one is darker?
Which one?
I wonder. Ding, 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 ding. And especially right here. You see that? That nasty.
Oh yeah, I can
spot.
see it.
Yeah. So that tells me you have a dysfunction sitting here. So is this L1, L2 where your diaphragm attaches to? Yep. You know, the little tuxedo tail of your diaphragm, the curve inserts right here. So this is why it's tight. So it's really not a diaphragm issue. She has a lumbar issue on the right side. Yes. That's the membrane. So let me tell you about the membrane. You see that triangle? Right here. That's your membrane, right? So your perineal membrane is in charge of orgasm. I said it. It's because it contracts, and then it goes into tetanic contraction and pisses off your pudendal nerve, right? So when you don't have a full range of motion on that perineal membrane, women usually have a tight one. So they kind of say to me, I can build it and I can build it and I can build it, and it just dies. Like, I never jump off the cliff. Yay! I just approach the edge of the cliff and be like, oh shit, what happened? Right? It's because that muscle that is already tight. So it's already tight and you contract, and the muscle goes, well, that's all I got. Right? But if we stretch it and it can contract all the way, let's call it 5 levels of it, then it's gonna give you a really strong contraction and piss off that nerve. Now it's just pissing off itself. So, yep. So when women come in and they have this perineal membrane moved and stretched, and they go home and they do the naughty exercises with their spouse, and then they come back to me and they go, that's a little different. I'm like, let's do it again. Right? And then they also will say to me, like, it was weird, bowel movement was easier. I go, yep. Fascia is fascia, muscle is muscle. It's a pelvic floor is weird. It's a giant hole at the base of your body. So, and it's all connected by fascia and muscles. So there is really no bone there. So you just stretch it. But you don't stretch it like throw a leg behind your head and you're like, yeah, I could do this. You have to be really precise and you have to go through 3 layers because pelvic floor is all 3 layers. She said, oh my God. I do have really strong thumbs. Yes. Sometimes people will say, oh, today you're not pushing as hard. I go, correction, I always use the same strength with my thumbs. It's just last session I cleaned up a lot of stuff and the body kept it. So I'm going back in and now I just have to do a gentle cleanup.
I wonder if I could teach my boyfriend to do this.
No. You know why?
Why?
Because it always ends up in the naughty thing.
Oh, it's so annoying.
And then the partner says to you, want to do it? You're like, great.
No.
Great. Feel this one? This is her adductors coming in right into the pelvic bone. It's gristly.
It's what?
Gristly. Oh. It's like a gristle. See this side? It doesn't have that.
Oh.
It's soft. On this side, she's soft. And on this side, you feel that? That's just tight. Check out her back.
Oh my goodness.
So this is treatment and a diagnostic. Did I move her fascia? Yeah. Does it tell me next time when she comes in what to pound? Lumbar spine, right? So patients who can do their own internal work, and they were taught by somebody else or they taught themselves, I don't even bother wasting time, right? Because for me, you buy my manual skills and my brain. If you could do your internal work, congratulations, I do the external work. Because 50% of dysfunction started on the outside. So I always go and put my hand on the sit bones because sit bones have hamstrings attached to it. You have your sciatic nerve, posterior femoral cutaneous and pudendal nerve coming through. You have your adductors insert. You have your hip fascia coming in. So it's like a pen station of all of the nerves and the fascia and the muscles coming in. And people underestimate their sit bones. They're like, what are those, like the nubbins that I sit on? And I'm like, you're literally sitting on the elbow. That's awful. So here where your hamstrings come in, you feel that, right? You want to make a stinky face, right? Like, that's her right side. Check out her left side. So here's your sit bone, and she went, people don't understand, pelvic floor listens to a lot of things. So if one hamstring is off, maybe a pelvis is a little bit off, maybe diaphragm is a little bit tight on this side, the cervical spine is not behaving, pelvic floor is the bottom. That basement just takes the hit when the entire building is misbehaving. You know what's interesting when patients come in? Let's say this week, you come in and I go, your diaphragm is off, but your pelvis is fully aligned and this shoulder is off. So and I fix you, and then I do your pelvic floor and it presents a certain way. The next week you come in and like your pelvis is a little bit off, and let's say your rib is a little stuck, and your pelvic floor will present completely different. And people are like, why is it every week it feels like we're fixing something new? And I'm like, because the basement, your pelvic floor had to adjust to what's happening up there. Yes.
Is there a time where it eventually all balances out?
It starts to balance out because when we stretch the right fascia and the muscles, and we make sure that you load your joints properly, and then you're strengthening and stretching properly. Like for example, people think they need to train their quads and stretch their hamstrings. Look at my face. You see my face? You see how pissed I am? No. We stretch the hamstrings, we strengthen the hamstrings. Let's try again. We stretch the quads, you stretch them. You don't strengthen, you stretch them. You strengthen your hamstrings because you want that gentle pull of the pelvis back. Because women, we pop that pelvis forward, right, and the hamstrings are super stretched. And because they're super stretched, what's above them? Your glutes. They go, well, if he's not working, I'm not working. So now the poor pelvic floor is like, how come you guys are not working and I have to take the hit? So when people come to me and they say, why is my posterior pelvic floor so tight? And I'm like, your hamstrings are too loose, your quads are inhibited, so I need to rotate you back a little bit into neutral, activate your glutes and strengthen your hamstrings. And people are like, strengthen? I've been stretching and my hamstrings are always tight. I'm like, but they're tight, it's because they're weak. And it's reflex, they just grasp. Every time you strain something that is weak, the job of the reflex is contraction, because you're gonna rip me. Don't rip me, right? And those people who do get hamstring micro tears or rupture, I'm like, dude, you are super weak, and now you just pounded through your weakness, so now you're ripped there, right? So I always say to people, it's a balance act, right? The front and the back has to talk to each other. So transverse abdominis muscle has to talk to the multifidus muscle. They are sisters. We already know who the sisters are. Quads talk to hamstrings, right? But people don't understand, like TMJ, the mouth talks to the pelvic floor. Fix one, so stretch one, strengthen the other, right? Feel that, right? See how it bounces here? Here doesn't bounce at all. Again, left side. We already knew that. My fingers flip over. All external. It's all outside work. I'm just cleaning this. That's it. Right by her sit bones. Those are the sit bones. You see? That's it. People take probiotic orally thinking, yay, it's gonna fix my gut and my vagina. I'm like, by the time it hits the gut, the gastric acid is literally lava. You killed it all. So it's never getting to the bottom of your gut. So probiotic in the mouth, probiotic in the booty. You want to be able to meet as close as possible. I don't have to see your coochie because we're obviously friends, but forgive me, I know this is trauma for you a little bit.
I'm good.
You need to do that.
Okay.
From the hole towards the booty. Stretch that like that. Right.
Okay.
From the hole. My finger's not even in the hole. It's right on the outside.
Okay.
There's your scar right there. And pull it down.
Oh my god.
Just think about this is what it means.
Wait, why is that so painful?
Because it's a scar tissue.
From the vestibulectomy?
Yeah, and
Oh my god.
Bartholin glands being removed.
Oh, no,
They're here.
the skeins.
The skeins.
Skeins.
So right there, you should be doing this.
Oh my god.
You feel that? There you go. So this one is worse though.
Yeah.
You gotta come back.
Okay.
It's a lot for an hour.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
How often should I do that?
What? Every single day.
Okay.
It's a scar tissue.
So, what is the theory that you have on like the burning heels? Because that's like the thing that drives me crazy. And just when I'm standing up and my low back hurts.
Yes, it's from the you loading your spine
Okay.
in a funky way, which we have to study.
Okay.
That you're pissing off the nerves and they just fire towards the heels.
Okay.